Hi, my name's Elara. I helped build a company from nothing, brick by brick, pitch by pitch with my cousin. Then one day I fell, and as I lay there in that hospital bed motionless, she thought I'd never hear her steal it all. She signed my name, sold me off, called me a problem already solved, but what she didn't know was that I was listening to every word. And I didn't just wake up. I stood up with everything she thought she buried. What would you do if your own cousin tried to erase you while holding your hand? Before we dive in, what time is it where you are and where you listening from? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. When I came to, the world wasn't loud or bright. It was like slipping into a cold bath with my mind surfacing, but my body refusing to follow. Everything was dim, sterile. The faint hum of machines and the sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. A dull ache pulsed at the base of my skull, but I didn't move. I didn't even try, not at first. Voices drifted through the room, muffled but close. I focused. One of them was hers, Mary's. My cousin's voice was unmistakable, cool, clipped, like she was giving instructions at one of our board meetings. But this wasn't a meeting. This was supposed to be a hospital. This was supposed to be about me. She won't wake up. Doctor said minimal brain activity, she said. Too steady, too calm. It's tragic, really, but at least now the transition will be smoother. I heard a faint rustle, then Maris's voice dropped lower, almost a hiss. The board's been whispering for weeks, Jet. They want a clean break. She's the last loose end. Another voice joined, male, familiar but wrong in this context. Jet, my ex, you did what you had to do, he said softly. She always hesitated, always wanted consensus. You can't grow a company like that. I stopped breathing. My heart thudded in my ears. Jet, what the hell was he doing here? Why was he talking about me like I was already gone? You're sure no one suspects? Jet's tone was cautious, almost nervous. Maris laughed, sharp and cold. Suspect what? That the brakes on her car failed conveniently? Please, they're too busy mourning her tragic accident. Maris's heels clicked faintly as she paced. The board's already on edge, but once we finalize the asset transfer and revoke her voting power, it'll be locked in. I wanted to scream, to rip off the ivy and sit up and curse them both. But I didn't. I kept still, eyes closed, breath slow, because something inside me clicked in that moment, sharp and silent. They thought I was comatose, and they were planning to bury me alive with my name still on the building. I didn't flinch. But even when I heard Maris pull the chair closer and lower her voice, Jet, we're too close now. Once the paperwork's done, you can step back. I don't want anyone tracing this back to us. Step back from what? What had they done? I swallowed the rising bile and stayed still, counting the rhythm of the machines. My limbs were heavy, but my mind was racing. I wasn't imagining this. It wasn't a bad dream. It wasn't a misunderstanding. They'd planned this, and somewhere in that twisted plan was the accident that had landed me here. Jet sighed. You sure about this? I mean, she's your cousin. She was in the way, Maris said coldly. She always was. Every vote, every decision. She questioned everything. You know how much faster we can move without her? There was silence for a few seconds. Then I heard paper rustling, a pen cap clicking. And the jasmine pins? Jet asked, almost like he was trying to soften the moment. She gave me one, Maris said, bored. It's tacky. I left it on the tray. Tacky? Jet chuckled, but it was forced. She poured her soul into those pins, Maris. You're wearing her legacy like it's a cheap trinket. Maris's voice turned icy. Her legacy? It's mine now. She built the frame. I'm painting the picture. I didn't need to open my eyes to know she meant the small silver lapel pin lying near the bed. Our company's signature symbol. I designed it the night we closed our first funding round, back when I believed we were building something honest, something lasting. Back when I still believed Maris loved me, My throat tightened, but I forced the emotion down. The pin was still there. She hadn't bothered to hide it, to move it. Like my presence, like my trust, meant nothing. I drifted into memory, back to the warm light of our small office 9 years ago. Maris laughing barefoot on the carpet, holding the prototype pin in her hand like it was gold. We'd built a sustainable architecture firm from nothing. Just 2 cousins and a ridiculous dream. I'd mortgaged everything to make it happen. My apartment, my savings, my weekends. And now she was selling me off like dead stock. Something broke quietly inside me then, not loudly, not with fury. It was the kind of break that makes you sharper, more precise. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of knowing I was still here. I would stay still, I would stay quiet, and I would remember every single word because silence was no longer about peace. It was about strategy. Suddenly, the footsteps drew close. The bed dipped. A cold hand brushed my hair back. Maris leaned in, her perfume familiar but somehow poisonous now. "It's better this way," she whispered. "You always made things harder." I focused on keeping my heartbeat steady, my breathing slow, and in the deepest part of me something lit up like steel under flame. She had no idea I was already awake. And yet I stayed still. That moment, Maris's whisper hung in the air like the scent of antiseptic and deceit. I counted the seconds after she left, listening to the click of her heels until the door slid shut. Only then did I allow my eyes to twitch, testing my range of motion. I couldn't move much yet. My limbs were sluggish, as if my body was trying to catch up with my fury. A nurse entered not long after. She hummed softly, adjusting my IV and checking vitals. I kept my face relaxed still, just as I had for the past few days. "She's stable," the nurse said to someone just outside the door. "Her cousin's been here daily, never misses a visit, but it's odd. She never asks about pain or recovery, just logistics." The other voice, a younger nurse, muttered, "I saw her yesterday flipping through Elara's chart like it was a business report. Gave me chills." There was a pause, then a muttered reply I couldn't quite catch, but I noted the way the nurse's voice lowered, that strange discomfort again, like people felt something was off, but didn't know what. Good. Let the tension grow. Later that afternoon, the door creaked open again. A deeper voice, smooth like honey but bitter underneath, cut through the room. Jet. I didn't flinch. He strolled in like he owned the place, like this was some lazy Sunday visit to a woman who was long gone. But I was still here, trapped inside this body, watching, listening. "Looks peaceful, doesn't she?" he said to Maris, who followed him in with a coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. "The final asset draft will be ready by next week." My heart pounded. Final asset draft? He walked over to the bed, fingers brushing mine, too casual, too mocking. Then he leaned in, whispering loud enough for both of them to hear. "You always hated Jasmine. Ironic you branded the whole company with it." Maris laughed. She never had the vision, just sentiment. It was always about the message, the feeling. That's why she stalled every merger. "You'll handle the ethics board." "Please," she scoffed. "We frame it as a medical necessity, unstable leadership in a family-owned firm. They'll practically beg us to take control." "And the press?" Jet asked, his voice tighter now. "They're sniffing around her accident already." Maris's tone was dismissive. "Let them sniff. By the time they dig, I'll have a tearful statement ready. Poor Elara, always so fragile." So that was their angle. Medical incapacity as a justification to push me out permanently. Jet and Maris didn't linger long. They left with the ease of people who thought they had nothing left to fear. But I remembered every word, every smirk. Hours passed. Nurses came and went. Night crept in. The hallway outside my room dimmed to quiet shadows and occasional whispers. Then came a moment I didn't expect. Dr. Torin. He entered alone, clipboard in hand, his expression unreadable. He checked the machines, then turned toward me, brows slightly furrowed. I made a choice. Blink just once, not too fast, deliberate. He froze. I did it again. A faint movement of my hand followed. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully. "Elara," he whispered, barely audible. "Are you awake?" I parted my lips, dry. Every word felt like glass, but I got it out. "Don't tell them I'm awake. They did this to me." His eyes widened, but to his credit he didn't gasp, didn't panic. He moved toward the door, locked it, then returned to my side. "I need you to repeat that," he said carefully. "I heard them," I croaked. "Maris and Jet, they're trying to take the company." "They staged this?" He nodded slowly, processing. "You're not delirious." "I wish I was," I whispered. "They planned it?" He pulled up a chair, sat beside me. "All right then, we'll do this carefully. I'll start logging every visit, every comment. We'll monitor communications, but Elara, you have to stay quiet. No one can know. Not until we have proof." I closed my eyes, the tension loosening just slightly in my chest. An ally. Finally, someone who didn't smile while sticking a knife in my back. The jasmine lapel pin glinted faintly on the tray beside my bed. I'd given that to Maris the day we launched our company, a symbol of trust, unity, future. She'd left it here like an afterthought. Now it looked like a tombstone. It was almost midnight when Dr. Torin slipped back into my hospital room. He carried no clipboard, wore no white coat, just a plain gray sweater, his ID badge tucked into his back pocket. He looked like a man running from his own conscience. He sat beside me in the dark without a word, then reached into his bag and pulled out a USB stick. "I downloaded the footage from the security system like you asked," he whispered. "Only one camera angle covers your cabinet, and you need to see this." He turned his laptop screen toward me. The video was grainy but clear enough. There she was, Maris, my cousin, dressed in soft cashmere, acting like the grieving saint she performed so well for everyone else. But not here. Here alone, she moved with purpose. She opened my private cabinet with a key, one I hadn't even realized she had, and rifled through folders, files, my journal. On the screen, Maris paused, holding up a photo of us from our first pitch meeting. She stared at it, then tossed it into the trash with a sneer. "Sentimental fool," she muttered, loud enough for the camera to catch. It took effort. Each letter burned, but I scrawled, "Call Nora. Succession folder. She'll know why." Clara read the note, eyebrows rising. "Nora? She's still an ops, right?" I nodded. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her front pocket. "I won't say a word, but I'll make sure it gets to her." Later that night I lay awake, the fluorescent light above my bed dimmed to a soft hum. I stared at the jasmine pin still sitting by the tray. Its color had faded slightly. Time had dulled its shine. Like so many things we once believed permanent, it used to symbolize trust, partnership. Now it looked like a lie in enamel form. The next morning, Clara returned on the early shift. She looked tense. "I recognized the woman from the hallway," she said, not even bothering to whisper this time. "That wasn't legal counsel. Her name's Sienna, your cousin's new assistant." The name slapped something inside me. I had warned Maris, warned her clearly not to hire Sienna. She was reckless, too easily impressed by status. During her internship, she'd once forwarded confidential drafts to a personal Gmail account, claiming it was for backup. That nearly cost us a deal. Now she was back, and she wasn't fetching coffee, she was asking for passwords. Clara said, "Tried to charm it, told them you'd want continuity." "Continuity?" Clara's voice was laced with disgust. "She was digging for your email access, Elara. I heard her on the phone, saying Maris needed full control before the vote." I let out the smallest breath. I wasn't surprised, just tired, exhausted by how far my cousin was willing to go. I closed my eyes briefly, letting my mind replay the quiet betrayals, the restructurings, the demotions masked as promotions, Nora's former assistant suddenly becoming head of strategy overnight. Clara let go, people cut off, my voice diluted. This wasn't just corporate politics, it was conquest. I took the notepad again, wrote slowly, "Thank you. But if she calls a vote to declare me incapacitated, I have one move left." Clara didn't ask what it was, but as she left the room, I caught her whispering to herself, "They're going to regret underestimating you." She was right. This wasn't about saving a business anymore. This was about reclaiming truth, because even if I lost everything, I'd go down speaking the words they were desperate to silence. I had one last move before they took everything. But the game changed before I could play it. A week passed, maybe more. I lost track of time in that narrow slice of a world where the ceiling lights never dimmed and the whispers outside your door could mean life or erasure. That morning the air felt heavier. Clara's face looked pinched when she came in for rounds, eyes darting toward the hallway before she even reached my bed. She kept her voice even, but I could hear the tension behind it. "They're calling the vote," she said quietly as she adjusted the monitors. "Maris is pushing hard. Said you told her years ago you didn't want to be kept alive if something like this ever happened." I almost laughed. That wasn't just a lie. It was a perversion of the truth. I remembered that conversation. It wasn't about me. It was about our grandmother. When the doctors had suggested life support, I said she wouldn't want to be a shadow of herself. Maris had nodded, pretending to agree, while already planning the estate, and now she was using my words against me. Clara pulled a folded piece of paper from her scrubs pocket. "Dr. Torin wants you to see this. It's happening today." It was a printout of a hospital transfer document, blank spaces filled in with tight, practiced strokes. My name sat at the top, but it read like an obituary. Below it, in bold letters, pending declaration of permanent incapacitation. Patient to be transferred to long-term care pending family consent. Family. That word used to mean something. She was orchestrating my removal in every sense. Legal, physical, symbolic. And the worst part, she almost succeeded. That morning, Clara lingered, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted my chart. "Elara, I overheard Maris in the hall. She was on the phone, saying the board's ready to vote you out today. She sounded gleeful. Like she's already won." I scribbled a quick note. "Get Nora to stall." Clara nodded, her jaw tight. "I'll do what I can." That afternoon, Nora sent Clara a screenshot. She waited until Torin stepped in for cover, then handed it to me quietly. It was the company website. My face gone, my name erased. A bold headline read, "A New Vision." The Calvert Institute looks ahead under Maris Calvert's sole leadership. The sidebar that once listed our co-founders, replaced by a minimalist press photo of Maris standing in front of our headquarters, arms crossed like she'd built it brick by brick herself. Not even an in memoriam, just nothing. I stared at the screen, hollow, a ghost in my own story. Dr. Torin came in that evening, his expression grim. "She's going to win unless we move now." But I couldn't move. Not physically, not emotionally. My chest felt like it had been hollowed out and filled with cement. Later that night, I whispered to Clara, maybe she earned it. Maybe I was just easier to cut away. Clara sat beside me without a word. The silence stretched. Then she stood and walked over to the sink. From her pocket, she pulled something small and set it on my bedside tray. It was the jasmine pin, bent slightly at the edge, a little scratched, but unmistakable. "I found it in the trash," she said, "buried under your visitor log sheet. I didn't touch it at first, just stared. Years ago, I had that pin designed as a quiet symbol for our team. Jasmine, because it meant resilience under pressure. Roots, because we'd built something that would outlast us. I'd offered one to Maris before the launch. She scoffed. "Too soft," she said. "If we want to be taken seriously, we lead with steel, not petals." I remember laughing gently. "You can't build a legacy without roots," I told her. She waved it off. "You're thinking like a gardener. I'm thinking like a general." And she was right. She was always preparing for war. But so was I. I just did it differently. That memory of that day, that conversation cut through the numbness like sunlight under a door. I picked up the pin, cold in my hand. Light, but suddenly heavier than anything I'd held in weeks. "She's trying to bury me," I whispered, gripping the pin tighter. But I'm still the one who planted the foundation. Dr. Torin stepped in a few minutes later, clipboard in hand. "I'm ready," I told him, voice raw but steady. "I want to be awake when she signs the papers." He looked at me, surprised but proud. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "She's expecting silence," I said. "But I'm about to leave a signature she can't forge. She wanted me erased, but I was about to leave a signature she couldn't forge." 2 days passed. The hospital halls had grown quieter, but not calmer. The tension had shifted, gone from invisible to nearly audible, the kind of pressure that made even the overhead lights seem too bright. I could feel the storm brewing just beyond the walls of my room. Dr. Torin was more cautious with his visits now. The nurse roster changed without explanation. Clara was gone. Just gone. Her name wasn't on the schedule anymore, and no one would look me in the eye when I asked, silently, blinking with purpose. I didn't have to be told. Maris had pulled a string, and Clara had paid for standing too close to me. But that didn't mean we were done. That same morning, Torin handed me a folded piece of paper and spoke in a low voice, just above a whisper. "Nora got the note. She's in." The paper was a revised statement, exactly how I'd scripted it for Nora. It would be read aloud at the emergency board meeting that Maris scheduled, where she intended to finalize the transfer of company control. It read, "Elara Calvert explicitly documented her conditions for any change of ownership. Her signature from 2021 onward includes a looping C in Calvert, which is absent from all documents filed by the current acting board chair. Any deviation invalidates her consent per Clause 8C of the Foundational Charter." I'd changed my signature 7 years ago. A subtle shift, looped, careful, deliberate. Most people didn't know, but Nora did, and so did I. That was the bait. Maris had forged everything using my recent documents, all with my old signature. She wanted the papers to look current, but not too new. She underestimated how much I remembered, even from a bed where she thought I slept. That afternoon, Nora sent a cryptic text to Torin's burner phone. "Maris brought in a new lawyer. He's pushing for a closed vote. I'm stalling, but it's time," I scribbled back. "Leak the signature discrepancy to the board's auditor." Nora replied within minutes. "Done." The next morning, Nora walked into the board session with something better than paper. She had my voice. It was from a legal seminar 4 years earlier, a recording of me explaining signature evolution in executive documentation. "You change how you sign over time," I'd said to a room of interns and young lawyers, "but I always include a looping C now. It reminds me where I started. Dated, time-stamped, public, unfiltered." According to Dr. Torin, when the board liaison heard that playback, he quietly requested a delay, pending signature authentication. I imagined Maris sitting there, face stone cold, while her perfectly laid plan began to unravel. That night, she retaliated. She stormed into Dr. Torin's office. I didn't hear it. I felt it. Doors slamming, voices low and angry just beyond the walls. When Torin stepped into my room later, his face was taut. "She threatened to have my license reviewed," he said simply. "Accused me of obstruction, and Clara's been reassigned out of this wing." Of course she had. Maris never liked loose ends. She also demanded access to your medical records, Torrin added, his voice low. Said she's concerned about your stability. I blocked it, but she's got someone on the hospital board now. I nodded, my jaw tight. She's running out of moves. The next day, just before noon, Maris appeared in my doorway. She wore soft gray cashmere, designer, but her presence was anything but gentle. She closed the door behind her with 2 fingers, then slowly walked over to my bed. You're slipping, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. This hospital can't protect you forever. Her tone wasn't angry, it was satisfied. The kind of voice someone uses when they think the final nail's already in the coffin. I didn't blink, I didn't flinch. But when she turned to leave, she paused. Her eyes caught the glint of something pinned to the neckline of my gown, the jasmine pin, worn like a brooch, sharp and deliberate. For a second her mask cracked. Just for a second. She left without another word. That evening, as dusk stretched across the Portland skyline, Dr. Torrin entered my room again, his posture tenser, more alert than usual. He didn't sit. He handed me a fresh sheet of paper, then looked toward the hallway. I've sent the forged contract to a colleague at the Department of Business Oversight, he said. We're one step away from a full investigation. I looked at the document, the ink still faintly smudged from the fax machine. It was the same fake form I'd seen before, the one where my name was signed without my hand, but now it was more than a betrayal. It was evidence. He added, when this blows open, it's going to be fast and it's going to get ugly. Are you ready for that? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. I didn't build all this just to have it stolen in whispers. He nodded, but before he turned to go, he looked back once more. You know, he said gently, the woman who walked in smiling last week. She might leave in handcuffs next time. And I hoped she did, because this wasn't just a business anymore. This was war. The woman who walked in smiling might leave in handcuffs. That morning the sun came through the narrow hospital window with a harshness I hadn't felt in weeks. It was as if the sky itself refused to soften the day. They'd scheduled the quiet signing for 10 o'clock. Nora arrived just before 9 o'clock, clutching her briefcase and keeping her head down as she passed the nurse's station. Dr. Torrin met her at the elevator and walked her to my room like a guest, not a co-conspirator. Inside, everything was ready. My hospital bed was freshly made, my tray table cleared, my voice steady in my chest. And beside me, neatly resting against a soft leather folder, sat the jasmine pin. I had placed it there deliberately, not as an accessory, but a declaration. By 9:55, the room filled with calculated energy. The firm's legal team arrived first, 2 associates and a mid-level partner named Gideon, who greeted Maris with practiced charm. Maris came in last, late by a few minutes, draped in ivory and navy like a politician preparing for a photo op. Her hair was glossy, her smile polished. Her posture said one thing: this is already done. She didn't even glance my way as she sat down. Nora stood to the side, awkward but composed. Her eyes met mine for a brief second. I blinked once. She gave the slightest nod. Gideon opened a folder and began laying out the documents. We're here today to finalize the transition of executive and fiduciary authority from Miss Elara Calvert to her designated successor, Miss Maris. He didn't get to finish, because I moved slowly, deliberately. I pushed myself upright in the bed. The motion was slow enough not to startle, but unmistakable. The air shifted as the sound of rustling sheets filled the silence. Gasps broke the stillness like glass. Gideon dropped the pen he was holding. Maris froze. I sat up fully, letting the blanket fall from my lap. I reached for the leather folder beside me and let my fingers rest lightly on the pin, not touching it, just reminding her it was there. Then I spoke. You forged my name. You erased my name. And you thought I would stay quiet until I died. The room fell still. Maris blinked. She's confused, she said quickly, standing up. She's not mentally stable. Her doctor—" "She's not confused," Nora cut in, stepping forward. "And her doctor is right here." Dr. Toran entered then as if on cue. "She's been alert for several days," he said, voice even, "and everything she's experienced during that time is recorded and legally admissible." Maris spun toward him. "You're jeopardizing your career." "No," he said, "you did." Then, just as planned, the door opened again. Clara walked in, flanked by 2 plainclothes officers and 1 detective in uniform. The man held a folder in his left hand and nodded to me before stepping into the center of the room. "Ms. Maris Calvert," he said calmly, "we have a warrant to seize all documentation pertaining to corporate succession, hospital authorization, and signature authentication fraud." One of the officers moved toward Gideon and collected the papers from the table. Nora handed over a USB stick. "It contains surveillance footage, voice memos, and IP signature logs," she said, "including timestamps from Miss Calvert's home internet." Maris backed up half a step, her face shifting, first rage, then disbelief, then something closer to panic. "You were nothing before me," she hissed. "You were just the girl with spreadsheets and jasmine pins." I looked at her calmly. "And you were just my cousin," I said, "until you decided I was in your way." She didn't respond. Her lips parted, but no words came out. One of the officers gently placed a hand on her arm. Not to arrest, not yet, but to make it clear this wasn't her room anymore. For the first time since she'd orchestrated my fall, she looked small, but I knew her too well to think this was over. I thought that was the final blow, but she had one more in her pocket. 24 hours after the signing room exploded into chaos, I was still in my hospital bed, but everything else had shifted. The video of me sitting up, confronting my cousin and calling out the forgery, had made its way online. It was clipped, captioned, and spreading like wildfire across business news and social platforms. My name had returned to the firm's official site by morning, a soft update tucked near the bottom of the homepage. "We regret any prior misrepresentation regarding the founding of the Calvert Institute." There was no apology, just eraser rewritten. Former staff began messaging me, some I hadn't heard from in years. "We always knew. She never could lead without you. I'm so sorry." But what I felt wasn't triumph. It wasn't even relief. It was quiet, unsettlingly quiet, like standing in a house after a storm, waiting for the roof to creak one more time before it caves in. That creak came faster than I expected. That evening, just as Clara was helping me review discharge forms, Nora burst into my room, phone in hand, pale as snow. "It's all over the news," she said breathlessly. "Someone leaked documents. Elara, they're saying you funneled corporate funds offshore." I blinked, not understanding. She handed me the phone. There it was, a breaking headline from a national outlet. "Founder of sustainable design firm implicated in secret offshore scheme." The article included screenshots of transaction logs, foreign account numbers, and what looked like my signature on internal transfer forms. I couldn't speak. The air in the room thinned. My fingers went cold. Nora continued, her voice shaking. "It's bad. It's coordinated. Anonymous whistleblower, perfectly timed release. There's already a call for an emergency vote to suspend you again." I sat motionless, staring past the edge of the bed. So this was her final hand. Not to win, but to ruin me completely. Even if she lost the company, she wanted my name to die with it. I barely heard Nora leave. I don't even remember what time the nurse dimmed the lights. I just remember whispering aloud into the room after she was gone. Maybe this is it. Maybe all of it. The coma, the fight, the reveal. It was just a delay. Maybe I'd been foolish to believe I could outmaneuver someone who had no moral ceiling. I lay back against the pillow, ready to ask Dr. Toran to quietly arrange my transfer, someplace no one would look. But just before I closed my eyes, Clara returned, holding something in her hands. "This was buried in the bottom of the visitor bin," she said softly, walking over. "It's got your handwriting." She placed the worn manila folder in my lap. I opened it out of habit more than hope. Inside, paper yellowed at the edges, was a memo I'd written 4 years ago. My handwriting. My original notes about implementing tiered financial permissions for large transfers. My idea to safeguard executive abuse. Attached to it, clipped with a rusted paperclip, was a revised draft with notes from Maris, her handwriting. There, in the margin next to my proposed routing structure, she'd scribbled, "Route split via Tier 3 authorization can be shielded through consulting Shell, efficient and untraceable." I stared at it for a second. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or sob. She had annotated her own blueprint for laundering and forgotten to destroy it. This wasn't a backup file. This wasn't a PDF or cloud draft. This was paper, real, tangible. And it matched the leaked whistleblower path, point for point. Nora returned 2 hours later with her laptop and a scanner. We sent it to our legal team, who confirmed it within hours. The leaked evidence had been built from the exact outline Maris had once authored. They layered metadata from old email logs which showed the revision draft had originated from her. It was her hand, her pen, her mistake. I didn't call the police, not yet. Instead, I made one phone call to a former PR manager named Celine. I told her I needed a podium, a microphone, and a live stream. I told her I had something to say, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in truth. The next morning, I stood, shaky but upright, in front of a row of cameras in the hospital's conference hall. Behind me, the jasmine pin rested against my heart. I looked directly into the lens and said, "They say reputation is what people think of you, and character is what you are when no one's watching. But sometimes, even when people are watching, they still choose to lie." I held up the annotated memo. "This is what power looks like when it forgets to cover its tracks." I paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Power doesn't come from what you take. It comes from what you can still build after they try to erase you. I stepped down without answering a single question. As I turned from the podium, Nora slipped the folder back into my bag and whispered, "She's going to see this and it's going to burn." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. They thought this was the end of my story. It was only the start of theirs. 8 weeks passed, but the quiet never returned. Not fully. The days after the press conference were filled with subpoenas, interviews, frozen accounts, and one powerful headline after another. It was surreal, watching the world discover what I had lived quietly for so long. My name, once erased, was now carved into every legal document tied to the investigation, not as a criminal, as a survivor. Maris had been indicted on 3 counts: forgery, corporate fraud, and attempted theft of controlling interest. She pleaded not guilty, of course, and still wore that half-smile in the courtroom. But when the judge denied her bail, citing risk of further tampering, her mask slipped for the first time. She didn't look like the woman who'd walked into my hospital room in pearls, whispering threats. She looked cornered and furious. I didn't attend every hearing. I didn't need to. I was already back at the office. Not as CEO, not as a martyr either, just as Elara. The nameplate on the door had been replaced, not flashy, just Elara Calvert, founding partner. The room felt different. No tension, no perfume clinging to the chairs, no second voice interrupting mine mid-sentence. Behind me in a small glass case sat the jasmine pin, restored, framed. The same pin Maris once tossed aside as too sentimental. I tapped the side of the display lightly and turned to record a message for our firm's new leadership program. The camera blinked red. I took a breath. Some of us build with roots. Some try to build with mirrors. You learn the difference when the storm comes. I smiled just enough. 2 days later, I took a personal day. It was a clear Friday morning, and the drive to our childhood home outside Eugene was longer than I remembered. The trees lining the driveway had grown wild, and the mailbox leaned slightly left. But the house still stood. I had called ahead. Our grandmother's caretaker left a box for me on the porch, documents, old school files, and one mystery envelope tucked beneath. I didn't expect much, maybe a few tax returns or forgotten sketches. Instead, I found a folded note, handwritten in a younger version of Maris's script from when we were barely teenagers. "We'll build everything together," it read, scrawled in blue marker. "We'll make Grandma proud. We'll change the world." There were hearts drawn beside it, crooked, sincere. I held it in my hands for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just folded it again neatly and slid it back into the folder. We had believed it once, both of us. But belief isn't the same as character, and promises written in marker don't hold up in court. That evening, I joined Clara, Nora, and Finn for dinner. We opened a cheap bottle of wine and ordered enough sushi takeout to feed a party. Finn made a toast, half joking, half sincere. "To the only woman I know who came back from a coma and still managed to outnegotiate a criminal with a law degree." We laughed. I laughed. Really laughed. That ache in my chest, the one I hadn't named since waking up in that hospital room, started to dissolve. Later, as I stood near the window looking down at the city lights, Nora came beside me. "Do you regret not pressing charges sooner?" she asked quietly. I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "Justice isn't a sprint, it's a rebuild, brick by brick." She nodded, understanding. We didn't say more. Weeks later, I walked into the Foundation's first mentorship gala, a program for underfunded female entrepreneurs led by women who knew what it felt like to be silenced, overlooked, or written out. I wore a navy blazer that night, simple, but pinned near my collar was that jasmine brooch, no longer a secret, no longer soft. As I stepped onto the stage, the first speaker turned to the crowd and said, "To the woman who showed a silence can still roar. Thank you, Elara." I didn't cry. I stood tall, and I smiled. Not for the cameras, but for the part of me that once believed I was nothing without her. She signed my name like it was hers to take, but I signed her ending with truth, not ink. Have you ever had to fight just to prove you were part of something you helped build? Tell me in the comments.